Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, today in the Dungeon Dive, I'm going to discuss 5 games that I think deserve more attention. And in each one of these games, I'm going to talk about why I don't think the game gets the attention it deserves and why it does deserve more attention. Of course, there are probably more reasons than the ones I'm going to discuss, but these are the things that came to my mind. So at number 5 is Champions of Horror. So why doesn't it get more attention? I think the bright, colorful graphic design and the art make it look more like a kid's game, or at least more like a lighthearted adventure game. And it makes it look like a completely different kind of game than the game it actually is. I think it does a poor job. The look does a poor job of selling itself to what I imagine would be its core audience, and that is fans of games like Mage Knight. The rules are also kind of bad, especially when it comes to the co-op and solo scenarios. And I think there was quite a bit of discussion about the rules ambiguities, which again, I think would turn off its kind of core audience of players who really do like these really tightly designed games. Because Champions of Horror at its core is one of those games. I think it was Tom Chick who called it better Mage Knight, and I completely agree with that. For me, it is better Mage Knight. So why does it deserve more attention? Well, if you like games like Mage Knight, but want something just a little less brain burning and maybe a little bit more focused on thematic qualities, then I think Champions of Horror is a game for you. It has fantastic card play. I don't believe it doesn't have any dice. If I'm remembering correctly, it's been a while since I've played it, but it is all about making very strategic, very tactical decisions with your cards, with your actions. And you have to be really smart in the play. If you play well, if you're looking for a game that makes you feel smart when you play well, then Champions of Horror is definitely a game you will want to pay attention to. It has various interesting modes, such as it has a competitive mode, which is the main mode. It has a mode where you play solo as one character and you're trying to kind of like solve these little puzzles out on the board. And then it also has some cooperative play. So it's a really interesting game. I wish it was still alive. Most of these games, I think every game on here is basically dead. And so that's a shame. So number 5, a game that deserves more attention is Champions of Horror. Coming in at number 4 is Space Cadets Away Missions. Now, similar as to how I thought Champions of Horror, I think its look kind of does the game a disservice because it is bright and colorful and it has great art and it has a really vibrant look. Space Cadets Away Missions is kind of the opposite. It lacks visual appeal, like a lot. It has a really boring, really kind of dull table presence. When that game is set up, it does not inspire me to want to play it. And so I would imagine that a lot of people who see it set up just kind of look at it and be like, I don't know, it looks a little dull. There's a lot of gray going on. It doesn't have very bright colors. The graphic design is not enticing. It is also part of an existing IP, an existing franchise that includes non-adventure style games. So I think that could also push away its core audience. Why does it deserve more attention? It has a fantastic dice system. And here is a perfect example of a game that deserves more attention because in my episode on why I like dice, I completely forgot to mention Space Cadets Away Missions. And somebody else mentioned it in the comments. And it's one of my favorite dice systems because when you roll, as you generate successes, as you generate more successes than you need, you get to apply those successes to do interesting things. So not only are you relying on the dice for luck to do cool and dramatic things, but you also get to make choices about how you are spending those successes. I love it. And it also has a ton of missions. It's pretty easy to teach and play, and it has a lot of variety. So there are a lot of things going for Space Cadets Away Missions. I wish it was still being expanded upon. I wish that it got more attention. Number 3 on a game that deserves more attention definitely is Hand of Fate Ordeals. And why doesn't it get more attention? Well, like a lot of these games that we talk about now in this kind of crowdfunding era, there were just too many Kickstarter exclusives. The best version was that deluxe special edition, and that thing is very, very out of print and super expensive now. It had a super limited retail release, especially the expansions, and now pretty much everything is out of print, and it probably will never go back into print because of that licensing situation. I think somebody should take the game and re-implement it into a new theme, a new license, that a new property that isn't based off of an existing license. Just take the mechanisms, take the engine, and redesign it because it is amazing. So why does it deserve more attention? It's still the best deck building adventure game that I know of. It feels like an adventure game. It doesn't just feel like a deck building game with an adventure / quest system tacked on. The way you move from location to location, it has strong character builds, various ways to build your characters and to equip them with skills and equipment. And the deluxe version, the special edition, has a fantastic roguelite mode where you just try to survive and you go on one mission after another, delving deeper and deeper into the world, into the adventure, into the dungeons, trying to survive. So it's a real shame that this game is out of print and that it did not garner the attention that it really does deserve. Number 2 is Darkus Knight II Edition. So why doesn't it get more attention? I think it's another game that just doesn't look very interesting. I think people hear when people discuss the game, one of the topics they often discuss is how on a turn you only get one action. And I think people hear that and think, I only get one action. I can only do one thing on my turn. And that really does turn off a lot of people. It does turn me off when I just think of it because it sounds so limiting. But Darkus Knight 2nd Edition is a game of minute possibilities. It's a game of small increments, little steps that you are taking. And I think it works within the context of the theme of the game because you are not heroes who are being brash and crazy and going out and doing things in the broad daylight. You are working as these guerrilla warriors. And you need to be a little bit covert. You need to be a little bit subdued in what you are doing. So you are taking little baby steps to get your goals accomplished, to accomplish defeating of the Dark Lord, the Necromancer. I also don't think it looks... I also think that the original version, so the first edition, was, of course, from Victory Point Games, and it had all of the soot on it, the laser cut chits, and the component quality was a little lower. And so I think when 2nd edition came out, I think maybe some people thought that it was still that kind of component quality where they were going to have to be taking a whole bunch of Kleenexes or paper towels and wiping soot off of all of the components in their game. So why does it deserve more attention? It's one of the better threat management style games out there. It has a really good sense of adventure. It has the 2nd edition has a ton of amazing characters, all with these character decks of skills. Every character, I think there's 37 characters or something. It's crazy the amount of characters you get in the 2nd edition, and they all have unique skills. The game tells really interesting stories on the table. It has a lot of different ways you can modify the game to make it easier or make it harder so you can make it the exact kind of game you want for your table. So that is Darkus Knight 2nd Edition. Okay, and coming in at number 1, a game that deserves more attention, but a game that does everything possible to push people away, and that is Myth. Myth, my God, I often call Myth the best game I wouldn't wish upon my worst enemy. So why doesn't it get more attention? Well, just pick a reason. It's everything about Myth is a total mess, a total disaster. The original rulebook completely left out a huge number of rules. It did a terrible job of explaining the kind of game it was, not just the rules, not just the mechanisms, but really explaining what the players were supposed to be doing while they were playing the game. It was some of the worst documentation I have ever seen. The way that they released the game, it was probably one of the worst Kickstarters ever. People are still waiting for stuff from their original Kickstarter. The original company went out of business. Somebody else purchased the rights, and they're still trying to deliver all of the things that people are still missing. Once you finally got the game and then later realized that there was a much better second edition out, so then you would try to get that second edition stuff, and you would realize that half the stuff from your first edition that came with the Kickstarter, that stuff needed to be upgraded to second edition in order to be able to play it. So then you had to go out and you had to track down all of that stuff. And then once you got that stuff, you realized that you only had maybe like 1 or 2 enemies to fight in the base box game. So then you would go out and have to try to find a bunch of the enemies, and then you would realize that the enemies that you got, that you spent money on and spent a bunch of time trying to track down, that those needed various scenarios in order to play, and then you realize that all of the scenarios are super expensive and hard to find, and the different modules are super expensive and hard to find, and then you spend 4 or 5 years finally tracking down everything, spending way too much money to get everything you need to have a complete game, and then you sit down and it's still a real bear to learn. However, why does it deserve more attention? Because it is absolutely unique in how it plays and what it does offer. There is no other game like Myth. I still want to do a deep dive into Myth, but it is so intimidating and there is so much to go over. But it is one of the most fascinating games on a turn-by-turn level. And in the kind of game that it really is this kind of open world, but not in the sense of like an adventure game, but an open world skirmish game. It is a very highly modifiable skirmish game where everything is in the player's hands. How many enemies do you want to fight? Pick a number. How many layers do you want the enemies to have where they can continue to generate enemies? You can do that. What kind of traps are on this tile? What kind of treasure? How do you want to proceed in character progression? How many tiles do you want to play in an adventure? It really is this kind of sandbox game, and they did a really bad job at selling this game. But there is no other game like Myth, especially as a boxed board game. And the way that the game plays is so unique. It's the only game I know of where you can take a single tile that's like, I don't know, 3x6, a 3x6 tile with inch squares, 3 inches by 6 inches. And you can have a super engaging, fun time just playing on one tile, just playing the kind of little combat skirmish scenario puzzles that Myth creates. And it's super, super interesting. It's very detailed. All of the characters play differently. They feel completely different from one another. There is some interesting loot. There are interesting things that you can add in. It's very modular. So it's a fascinating game. I really do hope that this new company, Ulysses, I can't remember the name of the new company, but I hope they are successful in perpetuating Myth and getting it out, in hopefully getting it back to retail, or at least getting the things that you need to really have a complete game, making those available to people who weren't around for many, many years ago in that original Kickstarter. I was not, and I spent way too much time and way too much money tracking all of this stuff down, and I'm still missing stuff. There are still things that I don't have where I have one component, but it mentions another component, and I don't have that. And so that kind of bums me out, especially in that game, because of the way that everything kind of works together to create this really compelling experience. So yeah, so that was the top 5 games that deserve more attention: Champions of Horror, Space Cadets Away Missions, Hand of Fate Ordeals, Darkus Knight 2nd Edition, and Myth. What are some of your games that you think deserve more attention? Let me know down in the comments, and we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.